All right, welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Skundberg from Village of Mount Zion PD in Illinois. Just hit 30 years total in law enforcement. He's a graduate of the FBI National Academy. Welcome to the show, Chief Skundberg. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. I was reading in your bio, and I intentionally didn't say this when we did your intro. You've been married for 30 years.
Correct.
What is the secret to success in a marriage, especially in law enforcement? What is some advice that maybe you have for other officers to be not only effective at home, but also at work?
I don't know the divorce rate for police officers, quite honestly, off the top of my head. I believe it's probably accurate to say it's higher than what a lot of professions are.
Yep.
We just both my wife is an RN, so she's
Mm,
used to shift work and second shift and things like that at long hours and staying late last minute. But we always kind of just made family very important. It's something we both agreed on. One thing she did is she would always make sure on those years of stretches where I would work second shift for years at a time. She just always made sure that the four of us, sat down to dinner every night. It was very important, whether she made something up or whether I made something earlier in the day that she just heated up, or whether we ordered something out. And that's one of the advantages to a small town. If you live in a small town, I mean, I could make it home fairly easy. It's not like I had to drive um, across a huge metropolitan area to get home for lunch, or dinner.
yeah.
So
So it sounds like from the very beginning, you made it a priority to not only prioritize work, but also prioritize family and to be present while you're there.
correct, yeah, for sure. And just at least working second shift. When your kids are in school, you know we were working at like a 6 2 6 3 8 hour rotation. So I would leave at 3 o'clock on Sunday sometimes and say, I'll see you guys next week.
Mm.
But I would at least see them, when for at least a half hour, 40 minutes a night, would just sit down to dinner and get that kind of interaction, FaceTime. Honestly, as the kids get older, that's more than enough for them, on their, as far as they're
Right.
concerned.
I
Um,
always talk about controlling the controllable, and I think this is a really good example of that. You can't control your shift
sure.
oftentimes, right? You can't control the hours. Sometimes you have to work longer than you expected. Sometimes you have to get up early and go to court. Like there's a lot of things going on with shift work in the law enforcement profession specifically, but you can control the time that you are at home. And what are you doing with that time? Are you being intentional? Are you being present? Are you putting forth the effort? So I appreciate you talking about the challenges and understanding like this is the reality of the job. But when I am home, these are the things that I'm intentional about, and that's what I can control. And so I think that's a really good message for anyone else who's listening. It's like, yeah, all those other things, really difficult to juggle, challenging, but there are things within your control, and you can make that effort.
Sure, I agree.
Give us a little bit more background. So I know I dived right into your marriage, but give us a little bit of background into your career as well.
Well, I've been with the Mount Zion Police Department my entire law enforcement career. It is a smaller town. I will say, what, when I graduated from Western Illinois University through their law enforcement program, and which like most law enforcement programs do, it required an internship, and I did my internship in Springfield, Illinois, which is a you know larger city in this area at least. And I just remember talking to one of the officers there, and he told me, he's like, well, if I had to do it over again, I would go to a smaller agency. And his reasons were there were less politics and just sometimes more maneuverability, that you can, plan more of a family life thing there. So when I landed here in Mount Zion, I really wanted to make a go of it and stay here. So, this is kind of where I've been, and I've done just about. I started off honestly as just a patrolman. I worked as one of my favorite things was being a school resource officer for 8 years. I absolutely love that, and it's still kind of one of those things that as chief is one of those positions that is kind of near and dear to my heart. I'm always kind of curious on what's going on in the school. It's with our current school resource officer. So, and just then went from sergeant and promoted to chief. After that. So that's kind of how I landed where I am.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm going to call out Jess because Jess is also from Illinois. So I'll let you talk about that a little bit, Jess, and kind of pass it on to you. But I know that she lived out there as well.
Yeah, I'm from a small town, more in north outside of Chicago.
Okay.
Uh, but what would you say is a common like misconception that you would like to relay to other officers about the job itself?
Um, you know, uh, One of the things that kind of surprises me about younger people coming into it, I don't know if I would say that, that is just, this is, and I don't know if it's a COVID thing, but just I think more people are expecting more flexibility in their work hours. And that's one thing that law enforcement doesn't really offer all that much.
Mhm.
So like, just as far as like younger people, I go, and I know this isn't necessarily a misconception for, people my age, but, um, I always tell people when we're doing orientations and we're hiring, it's one of the things I try to point out is, this is nights and weekends and holidays kind of thing. So, and that seems to me as one thing I've seen more over the years that people are more taken back and when they first get into law enforcement, quite honestly.
Just going
Um,
back to what you said about the school, like it sounds like there's some other avenues, or would you have any recommendations on ways that people can be flexible? Maybe it is like going to a smaller agency and they can still get the fulfillment of the career. What would you recommend?
well, I mean, as far as like flexibility in the schedule,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
scheduling,
Yeah.
things like that.
Just balance and work life.
Well, one thing is in this part of the state, you quite honestly see uh, younger people in their 20s getting hired on somewhere and then kind of going to another department in two or three. You'd be surprised how many applicants we get that if this was like the third, fourth police department they worked at. Quite honestly, this is kind of a thing where, and it's kind of probably similar to like factory work and things like that. Is the more seniority you build up, the more flexibility you're going to get. So when you get hired on somewhere, you have to understand. For my first couple of years, yeah, I'm going to be on midnights and probably taking a lot of crummy shifts. And but as you get older, and quite honestly, each department kind of does their schedule their own way. But um, it is a job that we've looked at it. Myself and my lieutenant, when we're talking about scheduling, we try to be as flexible as we can because we do want you know you're a better police officer if you're having less stress at home, I guess is and missing not missing as much with your kids or things like that. I understand you are going to miss some, but um, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. How have you balanced that? We'll dig in a little there.
Again, like I say, it's most of it is seniority. Like I said, one of the things I really liked about working at the school is 9 months out of the year, I had a pretty much a Monday through Friday schedule,
Mhm.
and that made it, it made it great. And so there are different positions, even in smaller departments, there are different positions where you can kind of land in that kind of niche where you can kind of get, where you can kind of lay it on a schedule that works for you. It's just honestly, but moving up, you want to move up through the ranks. When you get promoted from, you know, patrolman then to sergeant, I mean, you got to kind of start over,
Sure.
so you
Yeah.
can move on.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's very important for listeners to hear.
Sure.
It's funny, you're not alone. If that makes you feel any better, you're not alone. And I was talking to a chief recently, and he said that he was doing an interview, and the individual that he was interviewing said, or asked if they had any work from home opportunities. And
Yeah,
he was like, "No, I think you might be in the wrong spot. Like we definitely don't have work from home. Like you have to be available to take calls for service and so
yeah,
you're definitely not alone, but I love that you pointed that out. And I think it is important for younger people to know um, the realities of the job and to have a realistic expectation coming into the career.
sure.
You
So,
had some personal challenges with your health and wellness. Are you comfortable talking a little bit about some of
yeah,
the things
yeah,
that you've gone through?
sure. I mean, basically, I decided probably 4 or 5 years ago that I was going to take advantage of insurance and I was going to go to the doctor every year and get my physical and blood work and things like that. And I'd been doing that, and I would get the results, and I would generally get a phone call saying, "Yeah, your cholesterol is a little high. You need to eat better." Which and I would for about a week and a half, to be quite honest with you, and then I would go back into old habits. But I did that back in September, and some of the numbers for my PSA came back higher, which is more higher than what it should have been. I couldn't honestly tell you what it was, to be honest with you. And so I got referred from, to a urologist, and then I get referred. Basically, the long and short is they found that I had prostate cancer. So, um, again, my wife is an RN, so she was very kind of familiar with that. So I was very lucky to have, to have her. But it's one of those things. Yeah, I've had absolutely no symptoms. So that's one thing I would tell guys as they get older, and women too, that just kind of keep an eye on those things as you get older. You don't necessarily have to have symptoms to, when it comes to some things, I guess. But uh, I had no symptoms at all up until the time they wheeled me back for surgery. I kept waiting for somebody to walk in the room and say, "Yeah, we screwed up, made a mistake. You can go home now."
Mm.
But yeah, cost me about 2 months, and now I'm cancer free according to my last checkup. So all's good.
Congratulations. I think it's a testament to being proactive. You didn't wait until you had symptoms to go in. You were able to catch it early. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Do you feel like that experience gave you a different perspective on life and on health and wellness as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been, I mean, I would like to think to myself as a pretty healthy person. I would work out 3 or 4 times a week, and try to eat fairly good. Maybe probably not as good as what I should, but um, yeah, like I say, it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I decided I was just going to start taking advantage and going to the doctor, and it's just that simple thing of going and getting a physical and making the point of making that appointment and then going and doing it. It takes about what, a half an hour to get in there and have all that stuff taken care of. But had I not done that, uh, honestly, I'm not sure how this would have progressed. They seem to be pretty intent on me having the surgery or getting treated right away. So I'm not an expert in prostate cancer, but basically, what the choices I was given was radiation or surgery. Um, and I know other people or other men that have had the same diagnosis, and they basically say, "Well, let's take a wait and see approach," because I guess it is very slow growing. And again, I'm not a doctor. This is just what I was told. But I was not given that option. They're like, "Nope." Given the jump that I had and the numbers that I had, um, I needed to do one or the other. And just, talking to my wife, and we decided surgery is the best option. I feel great now. So, I'm glad I went that direction. But, uh, they say as far as prostate cancer go, they say it's a very, very curable and treatable if it's
Mhm.
caught early. But quite honestly, I mean, it can be fatal if it's not. I mean, it can spread. And
Yeah.
so honestly, just that decision to start going to the doctor 5 years ago, I think probably, was very beneficial to me. So
Yeah. And that's something that we talk about all the time is, how can we normalize proactive wellness, especially for the younger generation, because I'm sure we can all relate. Like when we're younger, maybe we're not thinking about that stuff. We're not going to the doctor, we're not thinking about what we eat or drink, or, we're just kind of invincible or like in our minds
there's,
where we are.
especially in person, you're not used to going to the doctor. I mean,
Yeah,
before that, I would tell you, if I was sick and I needed to go to the doctor, I would go. I didn't go out of my way to avoid it. But if it never occurred to me, hey, I haven't had a physical in a while. And I think maybe it was when I went to the FBI Academy to do that. You have to go in and get pretty much every kind of checkup and vaccination you can imagine, as kind of the vetting process for getting there. And I think that's kind of what got me to the point where I was going to start doing that. It was, again, it's just a simple matter of taking the time to make I go to the dentist twice a year to get my teeth cleaned, like most people do. So, I mean, why wouldn't I go to get my, blood pressure taken and, blood work done and things like that? So,
exactly.
um,
Yeah. And it can save your life. So I appreciate you talking about that. And I think it's a reminder for everyone who's listening, make your doctor's appointments.
Yeah.
Let's go.
sure.
Let's do it.
You know,
How did,
someone
no, go
once
ahead.
told me that you take your car to get its oil change every time the light comes on. Treat your
Exactly.
body
Yeah,
just like that.
exactly.
When, you know, set an alarm, set a light. So when that
Yeah,
goes off, to take care of it. But it's the same thing, just maintenance. You have to do the maintenance on your car, do the maintenance on your body.
Yeah.
absolutely. And it really is about a half hour. Once you get there, it's about a half hour in your day. So,
Hmm.
Yeah. How were you able to manage this part of your personal life with also being the chief of an organization?
I mean, like health wise?
Yeah. I've had a lot of conversations with other people who are like, I didn't really know whether I should tell people, how do I manage both home and work
Sure.
stuff, especially when it's something this serious.
I will say it was easy for me. So this for me was about 2.5 months off of work. But I was, I was comfortable with the people that I have under me. I've been chief for 12 years, I think. This is when I started, and one of the things I've done is I've just made sure that I've had people around me, um, in terms of like chain of command and things like that, that I have a lot of trust in. So I guess that's the biggest part of it, is just having faith in the people that you're working with. Um, and for the first couple of weeks, quite honestly, I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about work. After I started feeling better and move around more, after I had surgery, I started checking my email every day and calling in and finding out what's going on. But for those first couple of weeks, I wasn't thinking about it. I just didn't feel like I had to worry about it.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah. You had mentioned a little earlier about the FBI National Academy. What
Mhm.
key takeaways did you learn from there about wellness or anything that you would like to share with the listeners?
Well, what I would say, if anybody that's been to the FBI Academy will tell you, it's physically challenging. I mean, there's a lot of physical fitness involved with that. And one thing, when I was younger, of course, I started the Illinois State Police Academy in 1996 when I was hired. And you tell yourself you're going to try to keep up with physical fitness and stay in shape. Um, and it's hard to do with this job sometimes because there's a lot of sitting around. Um, Quite honestly, sometimes you're not eating the best if you're not getting home, and you're picking up food in a drive-through or something. You're not eating real great. But one thing at the FBI Academy kind of reset my brain in terms of physical fitness, and I came out of there uh, doing a lot more. Quite honestly, a lot more exercise at home and running. This was in 2020 when I was there, so got out in March, and that was about the time the whole world shut down. So there were no open gyms or anything like that. But it kind of reset my mindset as far as physical fitness.
Yeah, thank you.
What is your definition of resiliency?
Um, wow. I don't know, tenacity, stubbornness, I guess, to a certain extent. I don't know if that's the right, phrase that you're looking for, but just not giving up, and maybe sometimes finding a different path. If you're setting a goal and getting there, you know, if the first path doesn't get you there, find another path or making your own path.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that that really relates to everything we've talked about so far. You know, understanding that marriage is hard, the job is hard, having personal health issues pop up is hard, but how do you keep going? How do you find a way to keep moving forward? And I know that the FBI National Academy teaches a lot of this stuff too, and health and wellness and
Oh,
resiliency. So
absolutely,
I
yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah.
What conversations have you had with your team that have shaped the way that you lead?
Don't know if I can point to any direct conversations. It's a small department, so I have a lot of interaction with pretty much everybody here. It's not like an agency where you may hire somebody and then not really see them for months at a time because they're on a weird shift or something like that. So I see everybody, that all the officers that work here, I see them, multiple times a week. So I don't know if it's a specific conversation I could point to, but basically it's more getting feedback, I guess,
Yeah.
on a regular basis from those that I work with.
And it's nice being in a small agency, being able to have those conversations more regularly, I'm
Sure,
sure.
yeah. And we do have. I mean, it just, I don't know, just being. It may sound redundant as far as maybe other people we've talked to, but just trying to have an open door policy. Um, but as far as a specific conversation, I don't know that I can
Yeah,
point out. Nothing comes to mind, a
that's
specific
okay.
conversation. Those are conversations that happen all the time, quite honestly,
But yeah, that's
especially
okay.
smaller agency.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Do you think that having those open conversations and building trust within the organization is the key to retention, but also maybe also recruitment? Obviously the people who work with you are going to be the ones who are kind of advocating for other
Oh, for
people
sure.
to
Yeah.
come. So do you feel like because you have the opportunity to have those conversations, it's helped with retaining your employees?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, and it's not just recruitment and retention. I think it can be a morale issue, quite honestly. I mean, it can really help boost morale just to, um, just to kind of know what's going on, and be able to have face-to-face conversations with people and acknowledging, hey, you did this really well, or I really like the way this case you were working on turned out. Hey, that was a tough call you were on the other day. You handled it very well.
Mm.
Um, yeah, just getting positive feedback, having the opportunity to give positive feedback. Um, it's a morale booster, but it also kind of knows what standards you expect
Yeah.
and lets them know what kind of standards you expect.
Yeah. What do you think is maybe the biggest challenge that you're seeing in the law enforcement profession as a whole? Is it recruitment and retention? Is it morale? What are you seeing as one of those biggest challenges?
I will say the biggest challenge, and I think when this is something that came up at the FBI Academy, quite honestly, that was brought up a lot, and that was even 6 years ago. But recruitment and retention is an issue, quite honestly. This is a profession that has taken a real beating, in the press and on social media and with activists and even some politicians, and sometimes fairly so, if we're going to be honest. I'm not saying all criticism of police is unjustified, but I will tell you, when I first became chief, I put an ad in our local newspaper. Of course, this is 2014, basically that we were hiring, and I had 40 applicants uh, for an ad that ran on a Wednesday and a Sunday in our local newspaper. Now we buy space on billboards, radio ads, social media, recruitment videos, and things like that, and we may bring in 9 or 10 applicants at a time for a job that, quite honestly, pays for this part of the country. It is a pipeline to the middle class. Quite honestly, it pays well. Compared to what a 24, 25-year-old kid, coming out of college or the military, or even, out of high school, could expect to make. So it is, and I honestly, I attribute it to the kind of uh, standing, or the people hold police to, quite honestly. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but to some of the just constant barrage of criticism that law enforcement in general has gotten across the country.
Yeah. I mean, I
So
think
it's
everyone,
made recruiting very hard, and it has made, I can think of 2 or 3 people that I've lost in the last 4 or 5 years that I don't think I would have lost if it just adds stress onto them. Quite honestly, we're in a very small town. It's a very pro police town. The people that, where I'm at, they like us. So, but
yeah,
it still can kind of wear on you.
I think everyone who's listening would agree that public perception does play a role. It plays a role for people who are coming in, because you're signing up for that. You understand, that it's going to be an uphill battle, that it's hard, especially if you work within a department or a city that isn't pro-police, that's difficult. But then also just the day to day, and you have to understand that that's going to add more stress. Social media is going to add more stress. There's a lot of things that are adding more weight. And so I do think that public perception does play a role. And I think a lot of people would agree with that.
Yeah, and hopefully that pendulum is swinging the other way now. The last we tested recently, and we had an uptick in the number of applicants we were expecting. So hopefully that pendulum is swinging the other way. But I almost hate to answer recruitment and retention when somebody say what's the biggest challenge we're facing, just because we've been saying that for 7 or 8 years. It's been the most constant, but it is still true.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
with the uptick that you're seeing, how do you think you've overcome some of that, the recruitment and retention issues?
I think, like I say, I think it's just that pendulum is kind of swinging the other way now, and maybe people are focused on it, something else to complain about. Uh, and some of it is, quite honestly, again, and I will say there's been some criticism of police that's not unfair. And it would be, I'm not living in a bubble where I don't see people do dumb things, or people do stuff that, in this profession that we all, that causes all of us to get that mud slung on us. But in Illinois, I will say there's some reforms that have happened that that have been beneficial to us, and police officers have approached this job slightly different, maybe. Um, the term community policing has always been around, but nobody could ever really define it or tell you exactly what it was. But we are getting a lot more training in, say, crisis intervention and dealing with, people that are, uh, we're not dealing with people that are suffering from mental illness or even like a drug addiction issue the way we would have 30 years ago. I can tell you that. So I
Amazing.
think that stuff has helped.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. What initiatives do you have in place that you think are helping?
Well, one of the things that we do is, first and foremost, when we run somebody through an academy, we sign them up for all of the extra stuff that has to do with, crisis intervention. We make sure everybody here has been through in Illinois, the standard for crisis intervention training is about 40 hours, I think. So we just, make sure that everybody's been through that. We have monthly online training that not only gives our officers, insight into just the most recent, court cases and findings and things like that. But also, it's something you just can't ever say, okay, I've been through that class. No, I never have to worry about that again. So it's something that you have to keep on, keep up with. And we try to do that from a training standpoint.
Yeah. How are you encouraging them to continue? Is there any secret sauce or specific?
No, you know what? They really don't need much encouragement, to be honest with you. I mean, part of it is that Illinois Training and Standards Board requires some of it.
Okay.
But they want training in de-escalation and things like that. So it's not something I have to really push them to go to. When we have it, like I say, most of it is online. We do as much of it online as we can. Being a small police department, when I'm, if I send somebody to training, that's, if I send 2 people to training, that's like, 10% of my manpower, gone that day. So, but like I say, they don't really need a lot of encouragement. Like quite honestly, my generation would have, if you would have told me, 30 years ago that I was going to be in a class, trying to learn how to deal with somebody that was, de-escalate somebody that was having a mental health crisis, I might have been like, really, why do I got to do that? But we don't feel like that now. It really is. It's kind of caught on, to be honest with you.
Mm. Thank you. Our final question for you for that younger generation, the young men and women who are entering into the career today, what words of wisdom would you share with them that maybe you wish you would have known when you were younger?
Wow. I thought about this. I kind of knew that question was coming. So I thought about this. And what kept coming to mind, and I don't know if it's not necessarily something I would say I needed to do when I was younger, but is a difference I noticed in the younger people today from before. And like I say, we have been going through the testing and hiring process. I was surprised at the number of applicants who did not make it through the oral interview phase of that.
Mm.
People that when I looked at their applications or when, you look at kind of what their background is, I think I've quite honestly thought to myself, hey, that's a potentially really good candidate. But they go through an oral interview with the police commission. And I don't know if it's again, I don't know if this is a COVID thing. I don't know if it's a screen time thing and, kids not, spending more time, indoors and not socializing as much. But what I heard was, some of these applicants were coming in with really good, backgrounds, but they just did not have the social skills, quite honestly. Now I hear a lot, and I agree that we need, people like me, older people like me that have been around, need to be able to adapt to younger people coming in. I'm not somebody that necessarily says I don't want to be the grumpy old man yelling people get out of my yard, I guess. But it is important. This is a job that requires a certain set of social skills, quite honestly. And it's something that you develop over time, because it's not like a car salesman, quite honestly, where you're trying to, but you deal with people that are going, at times you're dealing with people that are going through the worst thing that they've ever gone through. So you've got to be able to deal with that, or at least have a base to deal with that. You have to be able to make it through an oral interview with 3 people on a police commission somewhere. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the exact answer, to that question, but it's just popped into my head because, it just seems to me that oral communication is a very important thing. And sometimes I think it's something I'm not seeing as much of. That's the one criticism. To me, quite honestly, kids are coming into this job. They are more educated. They are smarter. They write better. They come in, with a background in, technology that I didn't have, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But just from an old-fashioned point of view, there's still that, some of the face-to-face things that you're supposed to be able to do, I guess. Sorry, I didn't mean to babble on, but that just.
I don't think you babbled at all. And I think that a lot of people are shaking their head in agreement. I think any one of us who have interacted with the younger generation would agree. You spend a lot of time behind screens, whether that's your computer or your phone. And so we've lost that art of verbal communication. But in law enforcement specifically, it's so crucial that you're able to talk to people, not just for an oral board for getting hired, but you have to go for calls of service and you have to be able to connect with people. You have to make them feel better. You have to, give them information about what's going on. And so it's extremely important, I think, for all professions, unless you're maybe a coder and you don't have to talk to anybody. But especially for law enforcement, I think it's incredibly important that you're honing in your verbal communication skills.
Well, and sometimes people, if somebody lacks real good communication skills, the person that they're dealing with might interpret that as, say, a lack of empathy.
Mhm.
If that makes, or a lack of, this person's not paying any attention to what I say. Eye contact is important, when somebody's trying to talk to you about something that is important to them. So, like I say, it's not just, being able to talk to people, but it's how they're going to perceive you. They may not say, hey, this kid, just doesn't have much experience talking to people. They may say, this person doesn't care what I'm saying, that they don't care about this issue that I'm super concerned about.
Yeah, and we know that communication is one of the first forms of de-escalation.
Absolutely.
So
100%.
if you walk up and someone doesn't think that you care, do you think that they're going to come down or do you think that they're going to
Sure.
go up? And so,
Sure.
yeah, no, I agree with you. And
That's a good point.
thank you. Well, we appreciate you coming on here and spending some time with us talking about leadership and wellness. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you for having me.